Okay, hello. This is Comic Mistakes, the podcast and YouTube channel. We talk about comic books and other stuff. Today, we talk about comic books, and I'm going to be talking about What If. So, in 2006, we got the fourth volume of What If, and to me, it's one of the most unique volumes of What If, and that's what I want to talk about today. So, in this volume of What If, we got this world that is the whole six issues are one timeline, and we get to see from the 1800s up until modern day exactly the timeline of this world. For a what if, this is incredibly unique because usually what happens in a what if, it's very self contained, and the most you get is like, oh, some references in another series, or like maybe a two-parter, maybe a three-parter. But this is the longest continuous look into one world from a what if. It's a really unique idea. This is also the longest replacement for the Watcher in a what if series. He has disappeared in other series, but in this one, he actually gets replaced by somebody. A kid named Hector Espejo. The idea is that he hacked the internet of the 717 universe. Assumedly, he's from 616, and he just gets to read the history of this world. Just the plot device that holds all this story together, I feel, is one of the better ideas for a what if. You don't really see a deviation from The Watcher or Just Nothing. Volume 3 did have some of that. There was a comic shop owner, and then there was Brian Michael Bendis was telling the story of two different issues, so that does happen, but this time it was a little more cohesive. And today I want to talk about the timeline of this world. So, in chronological order, I want to talk about what happens in this world and see how everything meshes and see if anything really makes sense in this world as a timeline. Because you can have a lot of stories set in the same world, but that doesn't mean that they're very cohesive. So, I want to see how this works in this pretty ambitious what if series. I will also be referencing like real life dates because it does come up, real life events and real life people do get involved slightly within it, and I will be bringing them up when I can. So the earliest date we have is 1857. That is when Mashiro, which is the Daredevil equivalent of this world, gets blinded by the owl of this world. And that is also where we see baby Elektra and about a 10-year-old, like early adolescent, Matt Murdock. I'm gonna go say like around 10 years old. Yeah, that's the earliest date that we have right now. And that is also when Mashiro's dad dies, and the Kingpin equivalent is also taking over parts of Japan. And yeah, we have that. So the Daredevil part does not restart again until 20 years later, so it would be in 1877. But in the meantime, in America, we have the Captain America story, which starts in 1861. So in 1863, we see that Steve Rogers enlists into the army, and we also see his higher officer, I guess, would be Bucky Barnes, and we have a Sam Wilson. And yeah, so that's also the same time he gets his powers. He gets them from Sam Wilson, and in this world, it's like magical powers. And after he gets his powers and becomes the magical super soldier, he for 2 years, we know for sure for 2 years that he does his Captain America-ing, and by 1863, he is helping Abraham Lincoln not get assassinated and stopping the Ku Klux Klan from actually like getting a hold in America, which in turn also means that he helps during the Reconstruction era of the United States, and so that goes more smoothly for the South. And the other really big thing is we do know that Abraham Lincoln does survive in this world, and he gets to finish his second term. And because of Captain America's like influence and the fact that his powers come from Native Americans, the Native American craze becomes really big in the early 18s and the 19s, and so there's no Indian war, and yeah, fashion of that time and the influence of that time in America is very Native American focused. So then we go back to Daredevil's story. So in that story, it's been 20 years, and we see the grown-up Mashiro, and Elektra, and also a Matt Murdock. So, Matt Murdock would be around his 30s. He, in this world, is a analog of Bullseye instead of Daredevil, and Mashiro is the Daredevil part. Elektra would be around 20, as well as their Daredevil. Yeah, so then that goes on. They kill the Kingpin, and Matt Murdock becomes the US ambassador to Japan, and Mashiro and Elektra get married in this world. Timeline wise, we don't really have a date for that, so it would be probably around like 1880s at some point where that all that happens. I assume it would take a little bit of time for that stuff to happen, and so we're adding a little bit of leeway for that. And then a whole lot of nothing until the 19th century. So 1920 is the next date that we get, and that would be the birth of Namor. So in this world, Namor is born, but on the land, and he's raised on land instead. And yeah, that's it. He is born, he's raised by his father on land instead of his mother in the undersea. And then the next date we have is Wolverine's appearance. So in this world, James Howlett becomes the Punisher, and he goes on a murder rampage to avenge his kid and wife that he didn't know about, and his best friend, I guess. And he does that for a while. We don't really have a lot of time for that. We just know like his revenge happens pretty quickly. It seems like at least less than a week is the timeline of his storyline, and that's all we know that happens. He becomes the Punisher essentially, and yeah, we don't know anything else about that. Okay, so the next date I was able to find would be 1941. That is when Namor gets visited by the Atlanteans. He figures out he's Atlantean, and that also happens to be the same day as Pearl Harbor. His human father dies, and he decides to just be out and open as a Namor. And then for at least 2 years, he is helping the United States Army, specifically with his new friend, the Human Torch. There's no sign of Captain America at this point, so there's no way to know, but he might be around at this point. But it would probably be his grandson or his son. We don't really know at this point. We do know that in 1946, though, oh my god. We do know in 1946 that Wolverine's partner, Mateo, he writes a biography about Wolverine and his accomplishments as the Punishers. And that's about it about us knowing about Wolverine. We don't really even know if he's a mutant in this world. So he might be dead. We don't know. We just know that 20 years after the fact, he wrote a book about the fact. So he's alive. That's good for him, I guess. We don't even get to see him as an old man. So, okay. Okay, and a little bit after that, 1951, the USSR does its space program a little bit earlier in this world, and they sent up their version of the Fantastic Four, which includes Colossus, Magic, Natasha Romanoff, and their Reed, who is half Russian, half American. And they are working under Joseph Stalin for about 2 years until he dies. And at that point, they get under the control of the KGB. And then in 1963, they go to Cuba where they confront the Avengers. So for about 10 years, they were doing the bidding of the KGB and Joseph Stalin. And we see the ramifications. They go to different countries, Czechoslovakia, Ukraine and stuff, and they're, stopping unrest. And then in 1963, when they confront the Avengers, it's like a big thing. It's kind of like a Cold War type thing. And there's casualties on both sides. Hank Pym dies, and Magic dies. Sorry, I do not remember her name a lot of the time. So we know it's 1961 because Eisenhower was president, and he stepped out of office in 1961. And because of that, that could be the only latest date that the Avengers happened. So in this world, instead of 1963, where the Avengers first issue happened, it would be 1961. And it's almost the original lineup of the Avengers. So we have Hank Pym, Wasp, Iron Man, and Captain America. The only people we don't have is Hulk and Thor. We don't know what's going on with that. We kind of have an answer for Thor, though, in the last story. he at this time is probably a Herald of Galactus, so there would be no Thor in this world at the time. Hulk, we have no real answer for, but assumedly this would be at the point where he left the Avengers because he was only there for like 1 or 2 issues, and Captain America came in. So it still works timeline wise why there wouldn't be a Thor or a Hulk here. And then after this confrontation with the Avengers, the Freedom Fighters, as they're called, they take over the USSR and make it a home for mutants and humans alike. And the character equates it to Genosha, our narrator character. So next date is 1973. We know it's 1973 because they said it's 30 years from the last time Namor appeared. And so now Namor is back, and he gets a distress signal, I guess, from Namor. He gets a distress signal from the Human Torch, and he goes to help. He's being held captive by underwater Atlantean Nazis, and the U.S. doesn't want to deal with that, so they nuke it, essentially. According to my research, it'd be President Richard Nixon who's the one who did that, so he would have dropped the nuke on Atlantis, leaving the only survivor of Atlantis to be Namor himself. So we got no verification about what he does after the fact, but we do know that that is where Namor's story ends within this timeline. And then the last character, last issue, it was kind of hard to place because there is no concrete dates compared to the other ones. But I feel based on the technology that's being referenced that the Thor issue ends around the mid-2000s. So around the time the publication of this issue actually happened. You can push it and it could be like late 90s, mid-2000s, so it's something like that. Because the internet becomes a factor at that issue. So the first thing we see at the issue, they do talk about Bill Gates becomes president in 2006. So because of that, George Bush was never elected president. George Bush doesn't become president. Bill Gates does in 2000. And then I'm pretty sure right after that is where the Thor story ends. Because in the Thor story, he becomes the Herald of Galactus. And he saves all the Asgardians from the destruction of Galactus by bringing them to Midgard. And we see at the end of the issue that there is a news broadcast from a website called Balder Report, because in this world Balder becomes a superhero, and they're talking about like his adventures as a superhero in the modern day. And because of that, it makes me feel like it would be the now of that world. So it'd be like 2005. So if anything, the Asgardians have only been here for like, I don't know, a year or two, but they've assimilated into the world and they're helping people, and so yeah, that's where the timeline ends. Thor is the last character to be involved here. At this point, he does become Herald of Galactus again, and he helps him. So yeah, that ties up the loose ends. So I like this idea, but I really wish the execution was a little better because, okay, so a lot of the ideas are really good, but we don't see a lot of like crossing of ideas. So the Captain America Civil War one, they mention like, oh, Indian culture becomes really big in America, but we don't really see that in any of the other issues. And we know like the White Skull is involved in stuff. It's like, oh, okay, maybe that could have happened in the USSR thing, but no. We do see the great-grandson of the original Captain America in the 1963 Avengers, but you also see he has a vibranium shield, so that kind of puts into doubt some stuff. So if he has the vibranium shield instead of like the magic shield that his ancestor got, then would he get his powers from the super soldier serum instead of, the magic that his great-grandfather got? So then, like, we don't know because, they're not going to explore that. We know he's as proficient as his great-grandfather was, and that it seems like a vibranium shield. That's about it. I like to think it's a passing down of the mantle, and maybe, I don't know, it skipped a generation because we don't see him in the 40s. There's no way to really know what happened with that. assumedly in this world there wasn't any like freezing of Captain America because it doesn't really work out. There's no Bucky in this timeline that would be an equivalent and stuff like that. So, assumedly no frozen Captain America. But I do like it, you know. I think it's funny that a kid just hacked the internet. I think it's weird that his last name is Mirror in Spanish, but you know, I guess, oh, a mirror into another world? Then what does Hector have to do with anything? His first name? I don't know. I did like this a lot. I feel it wasn't as consistent as Volume 3 was in terms of its writing, but that one had like really big names attached to it. So it's hard to like knock it for that. But yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, thank you for listening, you know, to our podcast slash YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back as soon as I can with another video. And hopefully it's not about what if, but I love talking about what if. So thank you for that. Oh yeah. Again, podcast, YouTube, Instagram. Thank you. Okay, bye.